Well, for more insights on China-UK economic ties, I spoke with Joseph Mariathasan. He's a partner at Pangea Finance Partners and contributing editor for Investments and Pensions Europe. I started by asking him about his thoughts on this golden era of bilateral ties.
Post-Brexit, Britain is desperate and needs to have strong commercial relationships with virtually every major power it can. And China is clearly one of its most significant potential partners, even though in the past it probably hasn't had as much traded with China as it could have done. I've had Chinese institutions tell me themselves that they see the opportunities for investment in Britain as possibly improving as a result of Brexit, because they see themselves as potentially replacing some of the European investment that's likely to be lost. So both the government and the Chinese government as well, I'm sure, realize there's everything to be gained by establishing commercial or closer commercial relationships. And for the UK, it's actually going to be critical to try and develop that relationship as far as it can go.
Now let's delve into some of those opportunities. Which sectors are really garnering the most interest when it comes to cooperation between China and the UK?
Well, I've seen significant interest in areas like healthcare in the UK, and the opportunities to invest in UK pharmaceutical and healthcare research startups and so on. There's a huge amount of tremendous work being done in universities like Oxford, Cambridge, London, Edinburgh, and so on. So I think there's huge opportunities there. Obviously, huge opportunities in areas like IT, as well as the more traditional sectors in manufacturing, in autos, and so on.
And as we look at some of the size and scope of Chinese investments that we're seeing so far in the UK, how do you expect that to change going forward once the UK does end up leaving the EU?
That's a good question. I think no one really knows. I mean, the messages I've got have been really focused on some of the newer sectors like pharmaceuticals and healthcare and IT and so on. But don't forget, there's a huge hinterland of very traditional businesses and opportunities there, of which, for example, the Hinkley Point nuclear reactors.
Now, you mentioned Hinkley Point, and one of Theresa May's first acts upon becoming Prime Minister was to review that project, which is partly financed by China. How is that project being viewed in the UK?
I think the real criticism of the Hinkley Point project isn't so much to do with who's investing and so on. It's the fact that the electricity that's being produced from it has been set at a minimum rate of £92.50 per megawatt hour, or something along those lines, which actually is somewhat, I think that's almost double what the prices are that could be obtained for electricity elsewhere. So the issue for Hinkley Point is that it's looking to be tremendously expensive. Theresa May have well looked at the point also from the fact that her background was as Home Secretary, so she was focused very much on security type issues. And so there's also been the argument that having a Chinese investor in a critical part of the UK's infrastructure caused a security risk. I think that is balderdash. I don't think that's a reasonable argument to make at all. I mean, China has lots of nuclear reactors that are actually being built by, or have been built by, German and US firms. I don't think it's an issue that anyone would take terribly seriously.
Now, we have seen a lot of surprises this year when it comes to politics, whether it's with Brexit, with the US election of President-elect Donald Trump, and also some of this right-wing populism that we're seeing. So with all that being said, if you look at the big picture, how do you see these playing out when it comes to how it affects the UK-China relationship going forward?
I think the UK, if it plays its cards right, could actually could have a very, very strong hand. Populism in Germany and the US and other countries in continental Europe is having a slightly disconcerting anti-China tinge to it. You know, there's talk that Trump may actually declare that China is a currency manipulator. The reaction to China may well be that it starts selling US Treasury bonds, which will cause US Treasury bond yields to rise. Where's China going to put that money? Well, putting it in UK gilts may well be a great option, and that will actually drive down gilt yields and make it much easier for the UK to finance its borrowing requirements. But it also, if you look at the populism that's arisen elsewhere, I think Britain will possibly be able to, if it chooses to, be able to benefit by having a welcoming mat for Chinese investment and commercial relationships with China, which I think is what it should do.